You know, sometimes the most extraordinary things begin in the most ordinary places. Like one quiet afternoon, when the sun was just beginning to dip below the rooftops and the world seemed to slow down a little, a young girl was walking through a neighborhood park not far from home. She had taken this path 100 times before, maybe more. The crunch of gravel under her feet, the gentle rustling of leaves overhead, the occasional bark of her dog chasing a butterfly was all so familiar. But that day was different. That day something hidden in the ordinary was waiting to be found. As she strolled along, kicking a small stone ahead of her, she paused near a patch of grass beneath an old, slightly leaning tree. Her dog, curious and playful as always, began sniffing and digging at something buried under the dirt. It wasn't unusual behavior, but this time he didn't stop. His little paws kept scratching away at the ground as if something very important was hidden just below the surface. She knelt down beside him, brushing the soil away with her fingers. That's when she saw it. Something small, round, and covered in layers of dust and roots. It wasn't a rock or a bottle, and it certainly wasn't a toy. She pulled it out gently, turning it over in her hands. It looked like an old metal lamp, something straight out of a storybook. It was dull and scratched, but the shape was unmistakable. She laughed quietly to herself. "What is this doing here?" she thought. She sat down on the grass, holding it up to the fading sunlight. It was heavier than it looked and had a pattern carved into the side, swirls, stars, and symbols she didn't recognize. It looked ancient, forgotten. Out of curiosity, she wiped the side with her sleeve, hoping to uncover more of the pattern, and in that moment, just a simple swipe, everything changed. A low humming sound began to rise from the lamp. She dropped it in surprise, and her dog barked and stepped back. A faint glow surrounded the object, and then, with a rush of wind and light, something incredible happened. A swirl of smoke erupted into the air, circling above her before forming a figure, all bright and glowing with energy. Her mouth dropped open. She could hardly believe her eyes. Standing before her was something she'd only read about in books or seen in cartoons. There was no thunder, no dramatic music, just the quiet awe of the moment. The air felt warmer, charged with a strange energy, like the world had paused to witness what had just unfolded. She looked up at the figure, unsure of what to say, but somehow not afraid. Her dog, ever loyal, stood beside her, ears perked, tail still. The figure didn't speak right away. It simply smiled, as if it had been waiting a very long time for someone to find that lamp again. She slowly reached out and touched the cool surface of the metal once more. It was real. This was real. But how could something like this happen in the middle of a quiet park? How could something so magical exist beneath the surface of an ordinary day? That's the thing, though. Magic doesn't always arrive with fireworks or grand music. Sometimes it waits patiently, buried under leaves and dirt, ready to be discovered by someone who's open enough to see it. Someone kind, someone curious, someone who wasn't even looking for it, but found it anyway. In that simple moment, a forgotten lamp became the beginning of an unforgettable story, one that would test kindness, friendship, and the power of wishing not just for yourself, but for others too. From the moment the story began, there was always someone by her side, 4 paws, a wagging tail, and a heart full of loyalty. He wasn't just any dog. He was the kind that knows what you're thinking before you say a word, the kind that doesn't ask for anything except to be near you. His name was Max, and he wasn't just her pet. He was her shadow, her protector, her best friend. They'd been together for years, ever since he was a tiny puppy who tripped over his own ears and slept curled up beside her shoes. They had a quiet bond, the kind that didn't need words. Wherever she went, Max followed, and that day in the park, when the strange, dusty lamp turned her world upside down, Max didn't run away. Even as the smoke rose and the figure appeared, Max stayed rooted next to her. He barked once, low and protective, but he didn't leave. That's the thing about dogs. They don't care how strange or magical things get. They stay. As the journey unfolded, Max became more than just a companion. He seemed to understand things in a way most people couldn't. He knew when she was nervous. He knew when she was unsure. He stood guard when she hesitated, barked when something felt wrong, and nudged her forward when she needed courage. At times it felt like Max had a sense for the magic surrounding them, like he could feel it in the air long before it made itself known. There was a moment, not long after they met the Genie, when they found themselves in a place unlike anywhere they'd ever seen. It wasn't part of their town, or any town for that matter. The sky looked different there, bluer, wider, stretched out like a painting. Trees shimmered with light, and the air felt like it was humming softly with energy. She stood frozen, unsure if they should step forward. But Max didn't wait. He trotted ahead, tail up, ears alert, and she followed, just like he always followed her. Later, when the Genie explained the rules of the wishes and how powerful they could be, it was Max who grounded her. There's something about having someone beside you who expects nothing, who doesn't care if you're powerful or ordinary, someone who sees only you, not what you can get or what you're about to become. Max didn't need her to wish for gold or castles or anything grand. He just needed her to keep walking, to keep going. That kind of loyalty, that kind of quiet strength. It changes the way you make decisions. It reminds you of what really matters. One night, while they were resting under the stars, she curled up beside Max and whispered her thoughts out loud. She wondered what to wish for. She wondered what was worth asking for now that the impossible was possible. Max didn't answer, of course, but he rested his head against her arm and let out a deep sigh, the kind that says, "Whatever you choose, I'm here." That moment was more comforting than any advice. Max was there when things got confusing, when the second wish didn't go as planned, and they had to face the consequences. Max didn't panic. He simply stood by her side. And during the final challenge, when it really came down to choosing between something for herself and something that would help others, it was Max's eyes that reminded her who she really was. Not someone driven by selfishness, but someone who had always had a good heart. Sometimes all it takes is someone who believes in you without question. Max did that every step of the way. Even when it was over, when the Genie returned to the lamp and the world felt quiet again, Max stayed close. No more glowing skies or whispered wishes, just the familiar rhythm of their steps side by side, just like before. But everything was different now, not because of magic or adventure, but because she had grown. And through all of it, Max never changed. He was the same loyal dog who had chased butterflies in the park and followed her into the unknown without hesitation. Because the truth is, you don't always need a map or a guide when you're on an adventure. Sometimes all you really need is a friend who won't leave your side, no matter how wild the journey becomes. When the light first swirled out of that old, forgotten lamp, it was impossible to know what to expect. There was a hum in the air, soft but steady, like the world had taken a deep breath. And then, without warning, the smoke rose and began to take shape. Not just a cloud or a trick of the light. This was something real. Something ancient, powerful, and unlike anything ever seen before. And at the center of that swirling light and color stood the Genie. But what stood out wasn't the power or the mystery. It was the warmth. This Genie didn't arrive with thunder or rage. There was no shouting, no demands. Instead, he looked down with calm eyes and a small, knowing smile. His presence filled the space like sunlight after a storm. Strong, sure, but gentle. There was nothing frightening about him. He didn't float above anyone or speak in riddles. He simply spoke in clear, careful words, with a voice that felt both new and ancient at the same time. He explained, without rushing, that 3 wishes could be made. Real wishes, no games, no tricks. Whatever the heart desired, it could be asked for and received. But he also made something very clear. The wishes would not only change the world around her, they would change her. Each choice would shape her future. Each decision would reflect who she was and who she wanted to become. At first, the thought of making even one wish felt overwhelming. When someone stands before you offering anything you could dream of, it doesn't make the choice easier, it makes it harder. So many possibilities, so many things that could go right or wrong, but the genie didn't pressure. He waited, he listened, he even asked questions, not about what was wanted, but why. It felt less like being tested and more like being understood. That kind of kindness, coming from someone with so much power, was unexpected. But maybe that's why it meant so much. When the first wish was made, it wasn't shouted or dramatic. It was quiet, almost hesitant. A small, personal hope spoken into the open air, and the genie didn't just grant it. He honored it. He treated it with care, like it mattered, because it did. That's what made him different. He saw beyond the surface. He seemed to understand that sometimes even the smallest wish carries the biggest piece of someone's heart. The second wish came later, after a challenge, after a mistake. Something had gone wrong, not because of the genie, but because choices always have consequences, even magical ones. And instead of blaming or stepping back, the genie helped guide things forward. He didn't fix the mistake. That wasn't his role, but he made space for reflection, for learning. He reminded her that even powerful magic couldn't replace the lessons that come from facing the results of your own choices. That kind of wisdom wasn't written in books, it had to be felt, but it was the third wish that truly defined the journey. It came not from desire or regret, but from clarity, from understanding what really mattered. And when the words finally came, the genie nodded, not as someone granting a command, but as someone proud. It wasn't just about what was asked, it was about why it was asked. The final wish wasn't for wealth or fame or anything selfish. It was something bigger, something kinder, and in that moment, the power the genie held became something shared. Not just magic, but meaning, and when the final spark of light faded and the wishes were done, the genie smiled once more. Not a sad smile, not a triumphant one, just a quiet expression that said, "You did well." He didn't stay. He never meant to. That's not what beings like him do. He came to offer possibility, not to hold someone's hand forever. And so, just as quietly as he arrived, he disappeared, leaving only the memories, the growth, and the change behind. Because sometimes the greatest kind of magic isn't in what someone gives you, it's in how they help you see yourself. When faced with the chance to make a wish, any wish, most people's minds would race with grand ideas. Fortune, fame, maybe even a life far away from the one they know. It's only natural. But when it came time to speak that first wish aloud, something unexpected happened. Instead of thinking only about what could be gained, the heart turned toward what could be given. That's the part that stood out the most, not the magic itself, but the way it was used. The first wish wasn't about riches or escaping to somewhere glamorous. It was simple, almost quiet, a wish for someone else. A small act of kindness wrapped in the opportunity of something extraordinary. There was a local animal shelter just outside of town, struggling to survive. She had passed by it many times, watching volunteers care for injured animals, doing the best they could with what little they had. It had always tugged at her heart, and now, with this moment of unbelievable possibility in front of her, that was the first thought to rise above the rest. So she asked for the shelter to be rebuilt, fully stocked, warm, safe, for the animals and for the people who cared for them. She didn't ask for a statue or a plaque or even a thank you. She just wanted those animals to have a sanctuary. The genie's eyes lit up when she made the wish, not because it was powerful in the usual way, but because it came from such a genuine place, and in the blink of an eye the shelter changed. Not flashy or overdone, just right. Just enough, and somewhere nearby a few dogs barked happily without knowing why. The second wish came after more time had passed. Adventures have a way of changing people, of showing what's really important. This time it was about something deeper. There was someone in her life who had lost their way. Not bad, just stuck. A close friend who had once been full of dreams, but had slowly given up on them after life became too heavy. She had always wanted to help, but never knew how, until now. She didn't ask for that person to be made successful, or for everything to be fixed overnight. Instead, she asked for them to have the courage to try again. That was it, just a spark, a shift, a chance to believe in themselves again. And somehow in that quiet wish, something beautiful unfolded, not through magic alone, but through the gentle push it gave. A letter was written, a step was taken, and slowly something began to heal. Because sometimes the best gift you can give isn't a solution, it's hope. But it was the third wish that held the most weight. The final one, the one that took the longest to form, not because it was difficult to say, but because it required honesty. This time it wasn't about helping someone else. It was about something within. By now so much had happened. There had been confusion, beauty, fear, and joy, and with all that came self-reflection. It's funny how, even with magic in the air, the most difficult thing can still be understanding yourself. She thought about all the moments she had guessed herself, all the times she had stayed silent when she wanted to speak, all the ideas she never followed through on because she wasn't sure she was good enough. And standing there with only one wish left, she made a decision. She didn't wish for talent or brilliance or to become someone new. She simply wished for the confidence to become more of who she already was, to believe in her voice, to trust her steps, to grow without fear holding her back. The genie listened closely. There was something different in the air when that final wish was spoken. It wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was personal. Quiet strength spoken aloud. And once it was done, the change wasn't visible in the way the world looked, but in the way she stood, a little taller, a little more sure, because growth doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it whispers, kindness, thoughtfulness, growth. That's what the wishes became. And even though the genie would eventually return to the lamp, and the sparkle of magic would fade from the sky, what remained was something far more lasting, proof that even when given the chance to have anything, choosing to care for others and to believe in yourself is the most powerful wish of all. What made the entire experience even more meaningful was the way the story itself was told. It wasn't just about magic and wishes. It was also about the sound of the words, the rhythm of the language, and the clarity of each sentence. Every part of the narration was in British English, spoken slowly and carefully, with a tone that was both gentle and engaging. That made all the difference, because sometimes it's not only what you hear, but how you hear it that shapes your understanding. The narrator's voice felt like a guide, not just through the story, but through the language itself. Every syllable was pronounced clearly, with natural pacing and emphasis in just the right places. You could hear the soft R sounds, the crisp T's, and the melodic way British English rises and falls. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't overly complex, it was designed to be understood, not just by native speakers, but by learners. And in that, it offered something more than just a story. It became a lesson in how to listen, how to absorb, and how to connect meaning with sound. Subtitles added another layer. As the story unfolded, each line appeared on screen, perfectly timed with the speech, not as a distraction, but as a guide. Every word matched what was being said, allowing learners to follow along without getting lost. You could see the structure of the sentence while hearing how it was meant to sound. That kind of connection between listening and reading doesn't just help you understand. It helps you remember. What stood out most was how natural the learning felt. Nothing about it was forced. You weren't being quizzed. There were no complicated explanations or grammar rules being thrown at you. It was just a story, told in a way that helped you learn without even realizing it. The British accent wasn't just a feature, it was part of the experience. It brought the story to life in a way that felt authentic and charming, while giving learners a clear and useful model of pronunciation. There was a moment in the story when the genie was explaining the meaning behind the wishes, how each one reflected something deeper about the heart. As those lines were spoken, you could feel the emotional weight behind the words, and because they were spoken slowly, with care, and shown on screen at the same time, their meaning had space to sink in. That's something learners often struggle with, understanding deeper meaning, not just individual words. But here, the combination of clear narration and matching subtitles created the space to reflect, to connect, and to grow. It wasn't only about new vocabulary either, although there was plenty of that. Words like sanctuary, grant, and guilty appeared naturally within the story, and because they were supported by both sound and text, they were easier to understand and remember. You didn't have to stop and look them up. The story gave you the context you needed. That's how real learning happens, not in isolation but in motion, in the middle of a sentence, in the flow of a story that makes you feel something. And it wasn't just for adults. The story was told in a way that made it suitable for children too. The vocabulary was rich but not complicated. The grammar was correct but not overwhelming. And most importantly, the delivery was gentle. It invited you in. Whether you were 10 years old or 35, there was something in the way the narrator spoke that made you want to keep listening. That kind of narration doesn't just help improve listening, it builds confidence. It shows learners that they can follow along, that they can enjoy an English story without getting lost. And once that belief takes root, everything else becomes easier. The subtitles helped with spelling, with understanding sentence structure, and even with punctuation. You start to see how questions are asked, how pauses are created, and how different words fit together. That kind of exposure, especially for intermediate learners, is incredibly valuable. It bridges the gap between knowing and using, between reading and speaking, between hearing and understanding. It all comes together in the quietest, most consistent way. You start listening with more attention. You begin noticing how a British accent sounds in everyday language. You read along without needing to pause. And before you realize it, your English has grown. Not because someone told you what to study, but because you allowed yourself to be immersed in a story that was designed to help you improve in the most natural way. What makes this story so special isn't just the magic or the talking dog or even the wishes. It's how beautifully everything fits together in a way that makes learning feel effortless. At its heart, this story is exactly what a B1 level learner needs. Something that stretches the imagination, builds connection through friendship, and offers clear, accessible English from start to finish. The plot isn't overly complicated, but it's far from boring. There's enough mystery to keep you curious and enough emotion to keep you connected. A magical lamp found on an ordinary walk. A loyal dog who never leaves her side. A genie who appears not with loud thunder but with gentle wisdom. These elements aren't just there to entertain. They're carefully chosen to keep things interesting without becoming overwhelming for someone still building their confidence in English. And the language, Joe, the language is just right. Every sentence is crafted with care. It's not too fast, not too slow. The vocabulary is rich but manageable. You hear useful verbs like discover, follow, wish, and believe. You come across common but expressive adjectives like kind, powerful, confused, and loyal. These aren't just random words. They're words that show up in real conversations in real life. And because they're tied to a meaningful story, they stay with you longer. What really makes this story shine, though, is the sense of friendship woven through each chapter. Whether it's between the girl and her dog, or between her and the genie, there's always a feeling of trust and loyalty. And for language learners, those emotional connections help so much. When you care about the characters, you pay more attention. You start to feel what they feel. You become part of their world. That emotional link makes the English feel more real, more human, and more natural. And let's not forget the imagination. So many English learners are given materials that are dry, lifeless, or full of rules. But in this story, there's room to dream. A lamp buried beneath an old tree. A dog who understands more than he lets on. A powerful being offering the chance to change the world with a single wish. It's the kind of story that brings a little wonder into everyday life. That spark of imagination not only keeps things exciting, it also helps the language stick. When your mind is alive with images, your memory follows. The structure is another reason why this works so well at the B1 level. There's a clear beginning, middle, and end. The scenes build naturally. Nothing jumps too quickly. There's space between ideas so learners can absorb what's happening without feeling rushed. The dialogue is especially helpful. It shows how real conversations unfold. The genie speaks differently than the girl. Max, even without words, communicates in his own way. These small differences help learners understand tone, rhythm, and how meaning shifts based on who's speaking. And yet, despite all the care taken to keep the English accessible, the story never feels too simple. That's the magic of it. It respects the learner. It doesn't talk down or cut corners. It believes that people learning English deserve good stories too. Stories with heart, with imagination, and with messages that go beyond just grammar and vocabulary. Another reason this story is so effective is that it lets learners build confidence. From the first paragraph to the last line, there's a feeling of progress. You start by listening, maybe not understanding every word. Then you read the subtitles. Then you catch a new phrase. Then you hear it again. By the time the story ends, you realize how much you've actually followed. That feeling, that realization that you can do it, is something no textbook can give you. Everything, the story, the characters, the vocabulary, the structure, the emotional pull, it all works together to make this the kind of B1 experience that's both practical and unforgettable. It's the kind of English practice that doesn't feel like practice at all. It just feels like stepping into a new world for a little while, learning as you go, growing without pressure. And in the end, that's what makes it perfect. Not because it's flawless, but because it gives exactly what a learner at this level needs. A story that speaks to the imagination, builds confidence through friendship, and gently guides you into better English, one sentence at a time. Thank you so much for joining me on this magical journey. From the moment Jenny found that old lamp buried in the earth, something changed, not just in her world, but in the way we saw it too. We met Max, her loyal dog, whose quiet courage reminded us that friendship can be the strongest kind of support. And then there was the Genie, powerful, wise, and full of warmth, offering 3 life-changing wishes, not to impress, but to inspire. Each wish reflected something real and human: kindness, thoughtfulness, and the courage to grow. And through it all, the story gave us more than entertainment. It gave us language. Through clear British English narration and helpful subtitles, we practiced listening, reading, and understanding, naturally and effortlessly. This wasn't just a story, it was a perfect balance of imagination, emotion, and easy English practice. Exactly what a B1 learner needs. And if you've made it this far, you've done more than just follow a story. You've grown with it, word by word. If this helped you, if you felt connected, or if it made you smile even just once, I hope you'll come back for more. Until next time, keep learning, keep imagining, and most of all, keep believing in the magic of stories. Goodbye for now.